that there has been a claim brewing for months, ever since Elon Musk took over Twitter and promised to allow more free speech on the platform, that as a result of having allowed more free speech on the platform, Musk is guilty of fostering and provoking greater and greater amounts of both disinformation and hate speech. This is the theme that is always used against any platform now that announces to the world that we intend to resist the censorship pressures from corporate media or the censorship demands from various governments, because we instead want to allow our users the right of free speech to express their viewpoints freely, to hear other people's viewpoints, and to allow adults to engage in free inquiry and decide for themselves what they think, instead of having a centralized parent, a centralized corporate actor or government residing above them, telling them these are not things you're permitted to say and these are not things that you can safely hear. They have essentially succeeded in snapping into line most big tech platforms like Google and Facebook in particular through a relentless campaign accusing the executives of those companies of being guilty for massacres or genocide or the election of Donald Trump, which they see as even worse, as a result of allowing too much free speech online. So wherever a platform is allowing free speech, you will have these apparatchiks from corporate media and think tanks going and saying, the fact that you're allowing free speech is dangerous. Free speech on the internet is unsafe. We demand that you censor in accordance with our framework. We demand that you label dissent from our views as disinformation. We insist that you censor as hate speech any criticisms of us and our leaders. And if platforms refuse to, the punishment that they get is that these media outlets will run stories claiming that they're responsible for the spread of hate speech, that they're inspiring violence, and that they become a vector for disinformation. There is an entire new industry that has been created and now is being funded that supposedly employs experts, and that is what they do. They go around labeling any of these platforms that allow free speech as dangerous. So that was the context for the BBC interview with Elon Musk, is that the BBC has been among the platforms that have been promoting this idea that Elon Musk is endangering the world by allowing too much free speech. So we are going to show you this segment of the interview where that claim is discussed. The interviewer poses these questions to Elon Musk about that accusation, and you'll see what this exchange was, because I find this incredibly revealing.
You don't like or hateful? What do you mean to describe a hateful thing?
Yeah, I mean, you know, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned?
No,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm trying to understand what you mean by hateful content, and I'm asking for specific examples. And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. Honestly, I don't.
You can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't actually use that for you feed anymore. Because I just don't particularly like it.
But you said
actually, a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on a second.
my
You said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And
well, then how did you see the hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying.
Then I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet. And yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's false.
No, what I claimed.
You just lied.
What I claimed was. There are many organizations that say that that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my feed or not, I mean, right, and
literally
you look at something like the Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK, they will say that. So
look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a single example, and you can't name one.
Right, and as I already said, I don't use that feed. But
Well, then how would you know that?
I don't think this is getting anywhere.
You literally said you experienced more hateful content, and then couldn't name a single example.
Right, and as I said,
that's absurd.
I haven't actually looked at that feed.
Then how would you know this hateful content?
Because I'm saying that's what I saw a few weeks ago. I can't give you an exact example. Let's move on. We only have a certain amount of time.
Wow.
There are just so many things to say about that. I'm going to try to minimize the part that's just the entertainment value, which is very high, and instead focus on the main point I want to make. But first of all, I think it is really worth noting that the way this interview was conducted, I believe, was it was conducted over Twitter Spaces, and it was also recorded by Twitter. And so this is the kind of exchange that I can guarantee you would not have seen if it had been up to the BBC to take the footage and edit it together. They would have simply edited out that part because it made them and their journalist and their news organization look so preposterous, so humiliated. They looked like liars. Secondly, if you notice what he did, it's so customary, it's so common for how journalists think. He obviously has a view that he's pushing, and he pushed it from the start. He said, I believe that Twitter now has far greater hate speech than before you took over because of the free speech you're allowing. And then when Elon Musk started pressing him to offer examples or to prove that, he then tried to pretend that it wasn't his claim at all. He was saying, no, I never say what I'm thinking. I'm just a journalist. I'm a neutral journalist. This is just what other people are saying. But it was so obvious. He explicitly said, I have seen greater amounts of hate speech online. And because I think this is one of the most important parts, is that this is what happens in journalism all the time. These kinds of liberal corporate journalists, they speak only to and for one another. If you're somebody who dissents from their core orthodoxy, they almost never hear from you. They don't invite people who dissent onto BBC. They don't pay attention to what they say. They convince themselves that whoever dissents from their core foundational worldview is somebody not worth hearing. Even other journalists who have infinitely greater journalistic accomplishments than people like this who have never broken a single story in their life. So the only people they ever pay attention to or place value in are people who say the same things that they think. And so in this world, the fact that free speech on Twitter has produced more hate speech is something that everyone else is saying, everyone else who matters, meaning everyone else who agrees with the worldview of liberals at BBC. And so there's no need to question it. There's no need to provide evidence for it or to substantiate it, because in their insular world, it's assumed to be true. And so when you actually try and force them to provide evidence for it or to defend it, they cannot. They have no idea. All they're doing is repeating mindlessly what everybody else in their world, who they have vested with credibility, repeats over and over. You see, these are the people who are responsible for disseminating news and information, and the minute you put them under a microscope, they crumble. They crumble. They are as inept as they are dishonest. As Elon said, and he was absolutely right, he said, you just lied. You just got done saying that you've been personally experiencing an increase in hate speech, but now you're trying to say that you don't look at the feed. And you can't name even one example, let alone substantiate the claim. So I think it was very revealing about the behavioral components of these kinds of journalists as well. The more you look at them, the more obvious it is why they're so universally reviled and despised and distrusted. How would you possibly trust somebody like that to inform you about the news as opposed to try and deceive you and propagandize you into ideological convictions that align with him and the BBC's? I mean, it's very obvious what he is after having only listened to him for 2 minutes. The other really important aspect, I think, before I get to the primary point that I want to say here, is that the reason he felt so comfortable essentially accusing Elon Musk of this, despite having no evidence for it, is because in his world, Elon Musk is an enemy. He's been deemed a conservative. He's now on the right. He's somebody who refuses and rejects censorship demands, which they regard as sacred. And so once somebody is deemed an enemy on the other side, you slap a right-wing label on their head, it doesn't matter any longer what you say about them. You're completely free to slander them. You're completely free to hurl accusations at them. Even if you get caught lying, as they so often have, about things they're saying about people on the other side, they never have to recant it. They never have to retract it. They never have to grapple with it or acknowledge it, because they know that their audience wants them to do that. They know their readership is happy when they hurl accusations at the bad people, the people with bad ideologies, and they don't care whether it's true or not. So here you just see how casual they are, how willing they are to hurl accusations without having the slightest idea whether it's true or not. They don't care if it's true or not, and neither do their readers, and they know that. There's no professional price to pay for falsely accusing other people of things for which you have no evidence, or for disseminating false storylines or narratives that are steeped in absolutely nothing. Now, the one time that he offered anything of substance was when he tried to say, look, I can't prove this happened, but there's a group called the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, and they are the ones who will say, if you ask them, and they are the ones who have said that ever since you've taken over Twitter, Elon Musk, there has been a rise in hate speech. And also they claim a rise in disinformation. They're very similar phrases, hate speech and disinformation. They're both completely vacuous terms, devoid of any real fixed meaning. There's no substance to them. They're just labels and accusations. They're interchangeable. And their only real role is to accuse people of them, disinformation or hate speech, as a justification for censoring them. These are pro-censorship terms. These are the terms that have been concocted over the last, in the case of hate speech, couple of decades, in the case of disinformation, 5 or 6 years, as an argument for why censorship online by centralized state and corporate authorities is not only justified, but necessary. They have all these new groups that you've never heard of that have popped up with all these benign sounding names, neutral sounding names, the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, and they supposedly employ a whole litany of anti-disinformation experts and anti-radicalism experts, and they're somehow qualified, is the claim, to identify in a way that you're not able to what is disinformation or what is hate speech. These are experts, they're trained, they have credentials. But these credentials are fake. There is no credential that qualifies somebody to be a disinformation expert or to recognize hate speech. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update. Catch our full shows for free, live weekdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on Rumble, and join our locals community at greenwald.locals.com for all of my written journalism, exclusive after-show Q&As, and more.